So we know it's been the gold standard, ACL reconstruction for years. There's high rates of patient satisfaction, blah, blah, blah. You've heard all this before. And the studies over the last decade have shed light on higher rates of second ACL injury, particularly in younger athletic cohorts. We know that there's an 18 to 24 month return to pre-injury performance level. Studies have shown us that it takes us a while to cortically remap what we're doing after ACL reconstruction, kind of like a GPS. If you take a wrong turn, the map has to shut down, it recalibrates, and then you get an entirely new map. And the same kind of thing is happening for these athletes, where they get back on the field after reconstruction at 9 months, 12 months, but they're not the same. And they'll often tell you at 2 years, like, yeah, that first season I got through it, and now the next season I'm ready to go. So the importance of getting a second ACL surgery right in a competitive athlete can't be understated. I mean, Adrian, any thoughts? You agree with that? I mean,
yeah, I mean, the next time round it's always, I think, much more difficult for the patients, and the results, like all revision surgery, are never quite so good. So trying to get it right the first time is obviously key. And then if you do have to do it again, obviously you don't want to have that third visit. And I think now we're looking more and more away from the ACL, the tunnel position, what kind of graft did we use, was it a quad? You know, it actually is addressing all of these peripheral structures that get damaged, the ramp, the slope. So, yeah, I mean, I think the big question is going to be what you see now on the slide, which is when do you change the slope? And I think it was, I think it's now, as Christian said, the concern is whenever you touch the bone in an athlete, will they be able to get back to, and we all now are beginning to have examples of patients who we've done osteotomy surgery on for revision cases and so on, who do get back to amazing levels of activity when they have an osteotomy. So,
and I think everyone's scared. I mean, you get it wrong in an athlete, nobody comes back to you. And there's issues with proprioception. There's all kinds of things. You're putting them in relative recurvatum when you correct the slope, which is in itself a risk factor. So there's a number of things. And the ESCA consensus showed us that the group felt that 12% of these revision procedures weren't even necessary. So there's a lot of controversy and there's a lot of things that we have to work out. So when you look overall at revision ACL reconstruction, it's not that bad. I mean, 5.8% failure at 6 years. Lignani's study showed no failure at 6 years. But not all patients or surgeries are the same. I mean, some of these patients probably sit on the sideline with an unstable knee after their second surgery and you just don't know it. So multiple revision is a risk factor. These folks that keep trying to get back, keep tearing, the slope, as we've been talking about, recurvatum, and then obviously your graft choice. Use of allograft seems to be a very big risk factor for recurrent injury. So Griffith's study in 2013 showed a 13% incidence of re-tear in the multiply revised ACL, so more than double what we saw from the Mars group. Engler's study in ASMAR in 2020 showed a 21% recurrence in second ACL revision, and specifically posterior tibial slope was the determining factor. So if the slope was 13.3 degrees, it tended to have failed, but the average slope in the stable patients was only 10 degrees, and this was statistically significant. So recurrent ACL tear and slope, we know that the threshold's been about 12. That's what we throw around, but we talk about 14 according to a couple of studies. And then we know that slope deflection osteotomy seems to work. As Adrian was pointing out earlier, the Douguih study, he had no recurrent ACLs in a relatively small cohort. Mathieu Olivier in a larger cohort showed a 5% re-rupture rate, but only 40% return to high-impact sports, which I think was what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, another study, slightly, very much along the same theme, we've discussed it, Christian, is that work from Weiler. It's just amazing. So we were talking about it yesterday with Antonio, and he is this incredibly high-volume PCL surgeon from Berlin, and he looked at why some PCLs would heal spontaneously and why some didn't. And he had a threshold on the slope, and anyone with a slope of, what was it, Christian, was it less than 6?
Yeah.
Less than 6 degrees,
7 degrees
they never healed. they wouldn't heal. So come in, put them in a brace, see how they go, no chance. Anyone with a slope of more than 12, they always healed. It was the slope that was the defining factor in whether or not they were going to get away with conservative management for the PCL. And now we can see these studies coming through from Matt and other people showing that if we don't address the slope, first of all, there's a very high chance of re-rupture. And secondly, that these athletes can get back to sport.
And so that begs the question, and a great segue to the next slide, is why don't we fix the slope? And I think one of the big reasons is we don't have the evidence. We have small numbers. We have talented surgeons that are telling us this, but there's a learning curve for doing this osteotomy. As Christian pointed out earlier, it's not something that just comes easy to people that don't have experience. It's probably the second or third osteotomy type that you do when you're already experienced, and then it's not so bad. But it's concerning for the first-time folks. There's potential adverse proprioceptive effect in athletes that can't be neglected, and there's no guarantee that you're going to return to sport, as Matteo Olivier pointed out in his study. The other problem that I think of all the time is that you're robbing Peter to pay Paul when you do the osteotomy. You correct the slope, but then you put them in relative recurvatum. And Hileto's study in arthroscopy just this year of 457 patients found that when you had greater than 6.5 degrees of hyperextension, this correlated to a 14 times risk of recurrent ACL tear. So by doing the osteotomy, if you put them in relative recurvatum, what's the bigger problem? And then allograft, of course, we know that allograft has a higher rate of failure. The Mars group showed 3.5% failure overall with the autografts, and that more than doubled when you used allograft tissue. So when we talk about the biomechanical rationale for the internal brace in revision ACL surgery, this is a study that we did with Arthrex in the lab that published back in 2020. And what it shows, just looking at, this is from ACL repair extrapolating, but it shows that when you use the internal brace, that it brought the construct to within the stress strain curve of the native ACL. And that as you cycled it, the brace relaxed so that the biology could take over. And the concept here is that it protected the ACL during the critical period when the biology was vulnerable. And in fact, what it showed is that after 1,000 cycles at 250 newtons and 1,000 cycles at 400 newtons, the ACL repair was still sitting right where it was supposed to. So we know that the internal brace protects the biology. And in a setting where you have somebody who's susceptible to recurrent ACL injury, whether it's the slope, whether it's the recurvatum, they've already torn their ligament, you want to pull out the kitchen sink. I don't want to be back in their knee. So the internal brace is something that's kind of sexy and appealing in terms of how we protect the ligament. And so these were two outcome studies that highlighted, Gordon's study being one that he talked about yesterday, where he had 97% of patients in the index surgery. He used the internal brace and there was 1.1% re-rupture. Park's study was a 2-to-1 failure rate in an unprotected conventional ACL reconstruction. So clearly the internal brace is helping us. And I think, one of the things I think about, Adrian, is that if I'm not going to do the slope, what else can I do? We talk about the LET, the ALL. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, I'm not going to do the slope in that first time. I'm nervous about it, that high-level athlete. But certainly the internal brace and the LET or ALL, whatever your choice is on the list.
Yeah, I think it's addressing all of these in a chronic situation where someone's had an injury and they've re-injured. More often than not, they carry with them meniscal and chondral pathology. But if you take something as simple as the ramp lesion, and you actually, it's one of those amazing things where you pivot shift the patient at the beginning of the case, you do a posteromedial portal, you place 2 sutures to stabilize the ramp, and you can't pivot the patient anymore. You've actually stopped because the tibia is able to shift forward on the basis of that capsular tear at the back of the knee. So you're basically stabilizing the capsule by doing the ramp repair. So as we've got these tools over the last really 10 years where we can address things like the ramp, and I think Gordon's concept of, again, it needs proving, Gordon, but maybe that is a bit of secret sauce for the future, is a minimally invasive ALL. So you're not taking any tissue. I mean, some people literally cry at the thought of us putting a knife through the ITB, and yet we're taking strips out, placing it under the lateral collateral ligament. I mean, Rag said to me the other day, he said, what do you think happens to the isometry of the LET? And we were operating, and I said, oh, it's fine. You know, we're 9 and 6, we're absolutely fine from the epicondyle. And we just put the leg out straight, and the thing just moved a centimeter. And I thought, oh God, that's just so bad. So now it's really difficult through that smallish incision on the lateral side of the knee to actually do your LET and to fix it in full extension is quite challenging because everything moves massively. The window, if it's big, it's easy. But if you're operating through a standard window, and that's what the patient wants, when you come to go out straight, your epicondyle is a long way from the incision. So now, when we do an LET, if we do an LET, we actually, often there's like 8 millimeters of slack when the knee is flexed at 90, because when they go out straight and it engages, it comes out at the right length. So I think that's a problem. So maybe a percutaneous anterolateral ligament with fiber tape might be a better option. And I think as we address these peripheral structures, we are going to see better results. And to answer your question, Wiemi, I think it's not just doing an internal brace for the ligament. It'll be the biologics that we can use to enhance the recovery, and it'll be addressing these peripheral injuries within the knee and externally.
Well, and another consideration is that I get patients that come in now and they've heard of the internal brace. I mean, it's all over the news. It's all over, you know, it's popular media. And I'll have these athletes say, I either want an internal brace or I don't want an internal brace. And it's very interesting because some of them will talk to their team physician and they'll be like, whatever you do when you go to him, don't let him do the internal brace. And so I've had to sort of create this elite athlete algorithm around how you're going to do it, when you're going to do it. And so if they have an elevated posterior slope, then I will say, listen, you're at risk. You need something more than just a simple ACL. But then if they don't have an elevated slope, then I sort of put it on the menu and say, you can choose it if you want. Maybe it's not needed. You're not at as high risk. You don't hyperextend. But the person who hyperextends greater than 7 degrees and who has increased posterior slope, they're getting the kitchen sink. They're going to get the internal brace. They're going to get the LET or the ALL or whatever your choice is. And so I think, we're challenged to really think about these things in ways that in the past you just say, I have my algorithm, I'm God, you listen to me. And now the patient comes in armed with these things and you have to have an idea of what you're going to do. So I think it's a hugely interesting topic. So one of the things that we're doing at MedStar in Washington, D.C., is we're doing a study now where we're going to 10 fresh frozen cadavers. We're going to do an anterior closing wedge slope correction osteotomy. Each osteotomized specimen will be tested under 5 conditions, so ACL intact, ACL cut, ACL reconstructed alone, and then ACL reconstructed with either LET or internal brace. And so the LET internal brace will be our variables. And then we do an ACL reconstruction with a 10 millimeter diameter quad allograft, 5 with LET, 5 with internal brace, and then 2 different slope correction conditions. So it'll be interesting to see what the graft forces are. We look forward to showing you that data. Maybe, Gordon, next year we'll have that information for you, but we're trying to get better.